Welcome to Morgan Now, our campus news report here at Morgan State University. I'm your host, Ashlyn Wilson.
And Kenya DeZhane. Today we are joined by an incomparable special guest, the Vice President and Washington Bureau Chief of NBC News, Mr. Ken Strickland.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. This is an honor, honestly. How has your campus visit been today?
I've never been here before, and it's pretty impressive. I dig it. I'm digging it. You guys have a really nice setup here, and you guys are really positioned well for success.
Just talk a little bit about what led you to broadcast journalism and explain to our viewers what the importance of visual storytelling is.
I think the thing that led me to journalism was also as much about what led me away from other things, which I was not really great in math. I wasn't great in science, right? I passed those classes, but that was not my strong suit, let's say. So the thing it really was about the creativity, the storytelling. My mother used to joke that I spent so much time watching TV in high school that maybe I should consider that as a profession, so that kind of worked out okay. But I think it's really about the creativity and the storytelling and the way to impact people's lives through that. And you talk about specifically about broadcast journalism or TV journalism. I think the thing that makes that special is the immediacy of it, right? If you read a digital story, you don't really, if it's a breaking news story, that doesn't really come through that way. But if you turn on the TV and you can watch it all unfold in real time, there's something special about that. And then the camera, whether it's a still picture or it's a video camera, it just tells the story in a way that you can't really appreciate things as much in print. Think about natural disasters, all that's happened with the tornadoes and things like that. And so if you think about our history of civil rights, it was really, when you think about Emmett Till, it was really his mother's decision to say, I want this picture to be seen so that people really know what happened. That's a very extreme way of looking at it, but think about what it caused from that point going forward. It really changed the whole trajectory of the civil rights movement. The shorter answer is it entails everything. Somebody asked me earlier, what's a day like? Every day is a little different. I'd say in an overly simplistic way, it's my job to make sure that the Washington Bureau has enough people to cover all the things we need to cover. Do we have enough correspondents? Do we have enough producers? Do they have the right training to do their jobs? Are we doing it in a way that is fiscally responsible, also known as not spending too much money? And then just making sure that people are growing in their jobs. If they're not growing, why not, and what to do about it. And so I think that's generally it. It's just making sure that all the news that comes from Washington is covered, and it's covered on all of our platforms. So the Washington Bureau serves nightly news, the Today Show, Meet the Press, NBC, MSNBC. So it's a lot of mouths to feed, and so it's kind of my responsibility to make sure that all that stuff gets done.
That's a lot. That is a lot.
That is a lot to do. But more on your position, can you just talk about what it's like to be a black male in this industry and oftentimes being the minority in the room?
Look, it's a reality, a reality that is changing. In a couple of decades, it will be a minority majority in this country. But in certain industries, yes, we are the minority. I think for me, my approach has always been, it's very simple, just do the job well, right? And to some degree, maybe needlessly, my approach was, I want to work twice as hard as somebody else because I want to make sure that I stand out. I don't want there to be any questions about my own ability to do my job. And so other than that, it's really just, and we were talking about this with some of the other students, in those scenarios, it's the ability to get along with people. That is key because in journalism, in all forms of journalism, you can do nothing by yourself. I don't care how the technology improves, you can't do anything by yourself. And the people who stand out are the people who are good and can get along with their colleagues. And so that's the sweet spot, right? What can you bring to the table that makes you the person where the boss says, oh yeah, send her, she can work with everybody. That's the key.
Collaboration.
What can you do to stand out?
Be a great collaborator. So I did want to ask you, you touched on how many different networks you work with. And as the vice president of one of the big three, so talking about NBC, ABC, and CBS, what is it like having to work with other broadcasting companies?
Well, the funny thing is that in Washington, we all work together a lot. So there's this concept called pooling, where we basically realize that if the president is going to go somewhere and make remarks, and he's going to stand at a podium like this, Do you really need 5 cameras standing right there, all shooting the same thing everywhere he goes? That gets expensive, right? So we pool our resources. And so we'll say, one day, ABC, you're going to do it and give it to everybody. CBS, you'll do it the next day. CNN, you'll do it. Fox, you'll do it. And NBC, it'll be your turn. So we all have a relationship of trying to do that because it's very economical. We'd all go broke trying to do that on our own every time the president or the vice president or the first lady went somewhere. So we have a very cordial relationship around doing that. We're also very competitive.
I was going to ask
Right?
if
Yeah.
there's ever any
Right,
competition there.
Oh, there's
Yeah.
competition, but the things that we're pooling are considered commodity in the sense that everybody's going to be there.
Exactly.
But we still want to break news, have scoops, and beat the other guy, and we're happy to tell the other person when we have.
It's like a friendly competition, like between
Yeah.
siblings.
Oh, sometimes it's not friendly, but it's still always professional.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. That collaboration piece always goes back to that.
Yes,
Always goes back to
yes.
So more on coverage. Can you talk about your time covering 9/11, what that was like for you, and how, as a journalist, do you compose yourself and still deliver the story?
You're probably referencing on, there was 9/11 when I was with the president in Florida when that happened, and then about 3 or 4 days later, when we got back to Washington, I was with him when we went to Ground Zero for the first time as we flew in Air Force One. So you can imagine, as a journalist, you have to kind of build this, I don't know if it's a tolerance or this kind of shell or screen where you can't let your emotions just get in the way of what you're trying to do, or you wouldn't cover a lot of stories. Unfortunately, a lot of news is bad news. It's depressing news. It's sad news. Think about what happened in Nashville. And so part of it is just focusing on remembering what your key responsibilities are and doing those. And then, like, it's not uncommon, and you'll hear a lot of people say this who cover a tragedy, then I got home and I cried all night. That's, it's just trying to, and over time, unfortunately, you become, hardened isn't the right word, you just get used to it, and you compartmentalize. That's probably the better word for it. So when we went to Ground Zero that day, I was so focused on what I had to do because we were pooling it. So we were the only TV crew there. And so there was so much pressure to make sure we got all the pictures, that the sound was working, that the audio was clear, that we didn't miss anything, that you almost lost sight of where you were. It seemed like we were just on a movie set, but it was really important to make sure that all of that information got back. And then when you left, you began to feel the weight of what you were doing and what was happening there.
How do you cope with that? Do you have a method that you do, like go home and drink tea?
I think part of it is over time, you find better ways to cope in those moments. And then, but we're all human, and so there are those days or those weekends where you're like, I can't watch TV. I can't make any decisions. I just want to go and watch some sports.
Right. Literally, just
Right.
something to
You got to
relax your
unplug.
mind.
I mean, that's really important. I mean, if you think about the type of news that we cover on a regular basis, you got to take time for yourself. You got to take time for your mental health, candidly, because it can be hard to watch those things and talk to people. I mean, if the notion is, if you're in Nashville right now, imagine how hard it is. It's really important for those kids who were killed to tell their stories. But how hard is it to go to that family and say, can you give us pictures of that story? Pictures of your kid to help us tell that story. That's hard, right? And then there are parents that are actually asking the questions too. So you can imagine how difficult it is, and it takes time. It's not just anything that people can just wake up and do. It takes time to get that comfort in there. And just kind of the knowledge of going, I'm doing this for the right reasons because I want people to remember this child. And so I have to ask this question. I need to do it in the most compassionate way as I can. So the whole time in every story, you're being thoughtful about that. I mean, that's part of what makes us better storytellers is that we are human and that we can relate to some of these things. We have children, we have aunts, we have uncles, we have parents. So that kind of helps it keep us real for us.
The compassion piece. So far we have collaboration and
Compassion.
compassion.
Those are good.
One more word.
One
with
more
C.
C.
One more C.
Love that.
You want to?
Yeah, just to backtrack just a little bit. So mentorship is a really big part of our career and many careers and the like. So can you just talk about how mentorship plays a role in growing yourself in this career?
I think it's key. And I think that sometimes we get wrapped up in the word mentorship, which is like a very formal thing, like, will you be my mentor, right? But I think there's also just this ability to learn from people and align yourself with people. There's always somebody at a company, in a newsroom, who is that person that really is like the wise sage, right? That you want to just kind of come up next to and say, tell me about what you did. How did you get to where you are? Those kind of mentor-mentee relationships develop without anybody ever saying, I'm now your mentor, right? But I think that it's really important is because you need that perspective of somebody else who's been through it to kind of keep you on the straight and narrow. So when you get yourself all whipped up about something, they're like, Ken, it's not that serious.
Right.
Okay? Right? Take a step back. So those relationships are key because nobody wants to go through this, and nobody does go through this alone, right? You always want to go through this industry, surrounding yourself in the industry with smart people, but also people outside the industry that help you keep it real.
Right,
Right?
exactly.
I never thought about that.
I jokingly tell people that if you've been in this industry for too long, I need you to go home and get rid of half of your friends and get some new friends who are outside the industry. Because the reason I say that, I'm being joking, but I'm also being serious, is because we all tend to, in journalism, we all see the same things and have the same views. It's kind of like a group thing starts to happen. So think of that Auntie Charlene you have in Rockford, Illinois, who's not in this industry. Run a story by them. See if it's interesting to them, right? That kind of helps you keep it real with what's actually going on in the world and not what people call the Acela corridor, which is everything from New York to Miami.
Okay. And you know what? Being in this school, and I'm a production major, I do realize sometimes there's a bubble, especially being older, you're kind of encased in just these people. You're always around, certain people that but you never really branch out. So have to be intentional
You
about
really,
that.
really have to stay connected to people outside the business.
Connection, that's our next
Because the other thing is that, right, you must stay connected. I see what you did there. I see what you did there. Because it keeps, look, this is also where the great story ideas come from, right? Once you're a journalist, you're always a journalist. You're going to hear a great story idea. You're going to overhear something in the Giant, or the Safeway, or at the bank. And so you're always on keeping an open ear and an open eye out for where that story might be.
Absolutely.
So I do want to ask you, it's March 21st, 2011, and you've assumed position as the Washington Bureau Chief. What did that day look like for you?
It looked a little odd, actually, because here's why. I never really wanted to get in this industry to be a number one of anything. I thought I was a great number two, right? Sports metaphor. I love sports. I love football. So on a defensive side in football, the safety is responsible for everything if anybody gets behind them, any receiver. I never wanted that role. I never wanted to be like that position. I wanted to be placed someplace up close where I was working with other people. So I was the deputy bureau chief, and the bureau chief decided he was going to move to New York. And he called me in his office and he says, okay, I'm going to New York. I said, great, who's going to be the bureau chief? And they said, you are.
Oh, wow.
So at first, my first thought was, I don't think so. I don't want to be in charge. I don't want to be the one that has to decide what becomes right or wrong or whether we're winning or losing. And then I realized about all the other people that were at that organization who told me they believed in me, who told me that one day I should take on this role, and that are also going to ultimately be there to support me. So when you work in a bureau that has people like Kristen Welker, Chuck Todd, Andrea Mitchell, Peter Alexander, these are, Hallie Jackson, these are superstars, right? And so if my job is to support them, if you look at it that way, it's easier, right? And so over time, I kind of got over it, obviously. But it wasn't anything I was planning on. So I'm grateful and thankful. I jokingly told somebody there are days that I wake up and I realize, is this my job, really?
Oh, wow.
Is this a dream? So it's a pretty awesome experience. And also to have the job that Tim Russert had, who was an icon in this industry. I keep a little picture of him in my office on my bulletin board just to remind me that he's watching me and not to mess it up, not to mess up his house.
That kind of goes into imposter syndrome in a way, not really knowing if you're ready to take that step in the industry or further your career. Is there any way that you get over that? I know you say you still wake up.
I mean, I think, I try not to think about that too much in the sense of like, there's so much to do every day, so many things to fix and to try to address. It's like, it's almost like I don't have time, right? I just feel very fortunate and blessed that I have this opportunity. And I think as long as you keep yourself grounded, I told somebody that, some celebrity said this once, I never believe I'm as good as people say that I am or I'm as bad as people say that I am, right? And try to eat a lot of humble pie on the weekends, right? And that kind of keeps it real.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, more on that. So just talking about how you make executive decisions, like how do you go about considering other people when you have to make those really heavy or hard decisions?
I believe in making decisions as a group, right? Getting feedback from my colleagues. There's a core group of people who are in my leadership team that I would not make a decision if I have time. You know, there's some decisions that you just don't have time, but if I have time, I want to get the feedback of other people because the goal is not to be the smartest person in the room, but to ask the smartest questions. And that'll help you get to the right spot. And you also want, on tough decisions that affect a lot of people, where you can, you want to get buy-in. You want to hear other people's views, and then if you do have to make a decision, explain your decision. And again, that's when you have time. But in other cases where you don't have time, you just have to make the best decision and hope that everything you've been training for and all the other experiences you have will help in that moment where you have to make a quick decision.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I do want to ask, you sat down with Jared Blake, senior producer at MSNBC, and you talked about.
Really done your homework.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you go back to how students should look for mentors and how should they go about not being scared to talk to people? Like, you're a huge icon in the news world. How will somebody get over being nervous to talk to you? I know there are a lot of students who probably have not said anything today.
Right. No, I think part of it is that there are certain, I think right now companies realize that mentorships and mentee-mentor relationships are important.
Yes.
So like at our company, and I'm sure at other companies, they're actually formalizing programs for people when they come into the organization.
Yeah.
That's one. The other thing, we talked about this a little bit earlier, is when you go to people in your industry who are more experienced than you, and you try to build those relationships, some people are actually just put off by the word mentor. Like if I walked up to you and said, will you be my mentor? Imagine the pressure, right, that person must feel to feel like, oh, now I'm responsible for that person's career, you know. But just having a conversation with them, like asking them how they got where they got, or telling them like, this is what I'm going through yesterday. Do you mind if I pick your brain about it? The thing is that you can't be obnoxious about it. You can't be in their face every 5 minutes. What do I do now? What do I do now? It's really a give and take kind of thing, where you're learning from them, and then and again, you have to kind of read the room and read them if they're receptive to that, if you're not going to have a formal mentor relationship. But I find that those are the best. Those are the ones that are the most long-lasting. Jared, just funny you mentioned him. He called me yesterday. He had this great opportunity to produce a show he normally doesn't do. And our mentor-mentee program had ended like a year ago. But I still felt that connection with him. So a lot of this industry is really about making those connections and maintaining them, especially when you meet people who are just really good, wholesome, salt of the earth, well-grounded folks.
And you talked about not going to someone every step of the way. The next C is confidence. Confidence. How important is confidence in this industry?
It's huge. It's huge because, I mean, I think a lot of what journalism is, some of it is somewhat subjective, right? There are 1,000 ways to tell a story, right?
Absolutely.
But the key is wherever you go to this organization that you work for, what is it about this way they do their storytelling, and making sure you understand that. Because once you do, then you're not getting as much like, oh, you did it wrong, you got to try it this way. But confidence is something that just comes over time, right? It's not a pill you can take and get it, right? It comes over time. And again, surrounding yourself with good people who can also be honest with you and tell you about yourself. Everybody has those friends, right, who will tell you about yourself. You need those professionally too. And constantly also being in a position where you want to get feedback so you can see yourself growing and improving and things like that.
Yeah, and I think that's really good advice. And, you know, we're in a room full of students who also would love to hear just some advice you would like to give to us who are pursuing jobs or careers in this industry.
Okay, how much time do we have? No, I'm just kidding. I think the simple things is you're starting in a good place, but you're at a good school, which has a good journalism program, right? That's a good start. That puts you ahead of a lot of other people where they have schools where they don't have strong communication journalism programs, especially with a big production component to it. So lean into that. If it's right here in front of you, every opportunity you have where you're on campus to do something, and not just doing what you want to do, but take on a skill set that you aren't familiar with, right? Because the more skill sets you have, can you write? Can you shoot? Can you edit? Can you go on camera if you need to? The easier it is to get that first job, because what you may have your eyes on for that first job may not be available to you. But you'll take a job doing this other thing I know how to do pretty well too. Because the key is to get in the industry. Whereas I told some of your colleagues, the key is not to go home after you graduate because your parents don't want you there.
Very true.
I'm just telling you that right now. I've talked to everybody's parents here. They don't want you home. They want you to go out and get a job.
Yes.
Go explore.
Preferably not at Outback. It's something that's got some letters into
Yes.
it. WKY, anything like that.
Right.
Yeah.
As a journalist, this actually isn't a question that we went over, but how do you feel about the phrase, every story has three sides, yours, mine, and the truth? And how does that play into your life as a journalist?
I think there's some truth to that, but there's also, it's just more complicated as stories are, right? There's a concept that came out during the Trump administration about people who are doing both sidisms, right? Which basically means there's like, this side says this, and this side says that.
Like
That is, right, but that is not the best form of storytelling because it's really more like, this side says this side says that. But 4 years ago, this side was not saying that,
Right.
right? It's context. Otherwise, you're just basically transcribing two different speeches. So you, especially in Washington where politics is involved, you always want to have some context. Like, why do we think they're saying that?
Yeah.
You know, what is their relationship with this topic, right?
Yeah.
It's like the tomato industry saying that vegetables are the best thing for you. Duh, right? You have to kind of drill down and figure out, well, who said that and why.
Yeah.
So the truth is the truth, right? And that's our job, is to find it and seek it out. And sometimes it's like an onion. You have to peel back a layer after layer after layer until you get there. And it's also the best form of journalism is saying what you don't know. Right?
Right.
When you get to a story, especially a breaking news story, people are always trying to push the issue like, oh, we got to find out this, we got to find out this. It's just as informative to say, folks, here's what we don't know right now that we're trying to figure out.
That's good. Yeah.
Right?
Not being afraid to say that you
Right.
don't have all the answers.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because if you get up there and try to fake it or say something that's inaccurate, then you've done tremendous damage to your credibility and your news organization's credibility. So please don't do that.
Make sure you have all the facts, and if you don't, say you don't. Context.
Yes,
Last C.
You guys are on a roll.
Yes.
I think it's you. You've
No,
come up with
no,
all the
no,
C's
no,
so
no.
far.
On the spot, too. On the spot.
On the spot.
But we want to thank you, Mr. Strickland, for coming here today. We hope you enjoyed your tour here at the School of Global Journalism and Communication. And we just want to thank you all for tuning in to Morgan Now on Bear TV.